What's up guys, and welcome to another Bojinjan vlog. In this entry I wanted to go back to a very interesting topic I talked about. It was like a year ago or over a year ago now when I did this, right? And that is the topic of sexuality, right? And of course, me being a pervert, you know, like I think about this topic a lot, right? And I find it very fascinating, this topic, because of not only the nature of sexuality, but also the way that society likes to handle sexuality. Like, the way that it fumbles it about. It's crazy, right? And I find it intensely interesting, right? But over the years of like thinking about sexuality in a very deep way, like I've come up with my own kind of understanding of sexuality, and that a lot of that also didn't come directly through my own experience, right? Because actually, the truth is, like, I don't really have that much experience, sexually or even romantically, right? I hope to change that in the future, but like as it stands, like I'm not really someone who's been in a lot of relationships or has had a lot of sexual partners. I'm just someone who likes to think about the dynamics of male and female and how it kind of applies to the bigger picture of things, right? And so, like, in this entry, I wanted to kind of share some of my insights, which, hopefully should shed some light as to at least the deeper aspects of sexuality. Like, yeah. So, in the previous entry, or the last entry I did about sexuality, I was talking about basically the kind of effects of such things as feminism within society, which is essentially the suppression of sexuality in society, right? Because sexuality is such a potent force, right? It is something that is directly linked to our power, essentially. Like, sexuality is what drives, procreation, the kind of proliferation of living organisms, right? And so, like, it is kind of directly linked to our kind of power as physical beings, right? And so there's a lot of, because, a lot of us in society find ourselves fearful and powerless, like, there would be some kind of suppression or, like, corruption of our sexuality is almost inevitable, right? I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular, but in that entry I was kind of using, like, feminism as, like, the main example, right? But, in this entry I don't really want to talk about that. I want to talk about rather, like, the kind of more kind of, like, direct nitty-gritty of sexuality. I want to talk more spiritually about sexuality, and also more like kind of less like philosophically, and more kind of like down to earth about sexuality, more hands-on, right? So one thing we realize is that there is a difference between men and women, right? There's the common saying of men come from Mars, women come from Venus, and on some level, men and women don't see eye to eye necessarily, right? And that's true, right? That is true, but it's not 100% true, right? So part of my message is like learning to see the gray in something like this, right? I'm someone who loves gray areas. Like, I love nuance, right? I love thinking, like, all over the place about, like, nuances and, like, different, like, different what's the word? Permutations, yeah, different permutations of like that arise through, like, different variables, different perspectives, right? But essentially, okay, so the way that sexuality is viewed in society is first and foremost quite like it is more biased towards the masculine view of sexuality, right? To the extent where, like, you know, even women don't necessarily understand their own sexuality, right? Because, well, and the reason for that is that the things that that constitute sexuality for a man are more readily apparent than those of a woman's, right? So it's because essentially, right, you know, everyone knows that men are perverts. You know, men are attracted to big asses, you know, nice asses, nice tits, you know, good figures, you know, pretty face. You know, men are about appearances. You know, men look for a woman, or women rather, that have, you know, an aesthetically pleasing appearance, right? You know, that's like really obvious, right? And to an extent, right, you know, like, women are almost in society forced to kind of to adhere to that kind of expectation as well in society, right? You know, it's like you have there's a lot of kind of confusion in, like, that is proliferated in the media, like the women also look for, like, you know, like a man's, like, you know, like physique and like facial, you know, like quality, you know, things like that, right? And I'm not saying that that's not true, but it is a mistake, right? Or rather, it is not, you know, it is not indicative of the real truth, right? Women aren't attracted first and foremost by physicality, right? Women are attracted to energy, right? Men are attracted to physicality, and women are attracted to energy, right? And what do I mean by energy, right? I mean, okay, so there's a book that a friend once gave to me, but I forgot what it's called. I do know that the person who wrote it was his name was Brandon or Brendan. I should have probably looked this up before I started the entry, but, like, nevertheless, like, it's a book about relationships, right? And, like, in this book, he writes about how men are secure in their future, but insecure about their present, and women are secure about their present, but insecure about their future. And therein lies the dynamic, right, between men and women, right? And the difference between the attraction mechanism of men and women, right, is that a man is looking upon a woman in terms of her ability in the present moment to bear his offspring, essentially, right? Whereas the woman is looking upon the man to provide her with security in rearing the offspring, as it were, right? And so a man is attracted to a woman's appearance because he is looking for a mate that will again, you know, I'm using, like, you know, Darwinian kind of, you know, ways of thinking, like, to kind of make it, to articulate it, I guess, to make it relatable, but, like, you know, to bear his offspring, essentially, like to have kids with, right? To receive his, you know, his progeny, or to bear his progeny, rather, you know, to receive his genetic information. Whereas, you know, a woman, being that vessel, you know, is looking to, you know, it requires the man to then to provide the offspring that she bears with, you know, like, a stable environment, right? And so the man is worried about, like, the man is worried about what is in front of him, whereas the woman is worried about what is in the future, right? So the things that make a woman attracted to a man primarily are things that indicate what kind of a man he is, right? Whereas the man is looking at the woman in terms of what she looks like, an indication of like her ability to, to bear children, to please him sexually. That's more of a modern kind of like rationalization. Is like a man looks at the woman to kind of gauge like how much she will like pleasure him physically, right? But the woman is looking at not what the man looks like, right? But rather like she's trying to consider what kind of man he is, right? And so the man is attracted to the appearance of a woman, whereas the woman is attracted to the idea of a man, right? The man is attracted to what he sees. The woman is attracted to what she thinks, right? So this is why women put on makeup. This is why women wear nice clothes that complement their appearance, right? You could view this in like a healthy way where like, it's just becoming more beautiful, right? Or you could view this as like a dark way, like manipulating men by like kind of concealing your appearance, or like kind of like making it, presenting yourself in a way that is an exaggeration of how you really look, right? Because that's what men look for in a woman, right? Similarly, men will present themselves in terms of an ideological way. So like they want to seem as if they are successful, that they are confident, that they are secure to the woman, right? So the man is feeding into the idea that the woman has of him, right? And again, this could be seen as just like expressing your masculinity, or it could be seen as like lying to a woman, giving her a false image of you, so that she then falls for that false image, right? And then when she comes to learn who you really are, she's shocked because like the real you, or like your real capability, is not as kind of glamorous, let's just say, as the image that you first presented to her, right? And this is the dynamic, right? This is what happens, right? This is the difference between attraction mechanism between man and woman, right? A man is shallow. I've heard like a lot of girls say that men are shallow. It's true. That's just what men are. The judgment of shallow, well, hey, it's a negative one, but like that's not going to change the fact that men are physically like oriented, right? Women, on the other hand, are attracted by her idea of, or like who the man is, not what he looks like, but who he is, right? And similarly, men think that women are petty in this way, like they kind of like they're gold diggers, and like they're like star fuckers. It's a random word that came up in like this random interview I watched, but and women are chasing a man's status, right? So this is the fundamental difference between what attracts a man to a woman versus what attracts a woman to a man, right? They're different, right? It's not to say that women don't judge a man by his looks, or that men don't judge a woman by the way that she is. No, like those things come afterwards, right? But the initial polarity is that men bring the status and look for the looks, right? And women bring the looks and look for the status, right? And then this brings me to the way that to kind of like the main kind of thing that I want to talk about in this entry, which is the way that sexuality is perceived, particularly the difference, right, between men and women, right? Men, again, the way that we view sexuality is it's very masculine, it's very much biased towards the masculine take on sexuality in society, which is appearance, like it is about sex itself, right? But what is sex? You could define it as like, when you put your dick in a girl's vagina, or like vice versa if you're with a woman, right? But like, but what is sex, right? If we kind of like extend it beyond its kind of like compartmentalized box that we like to put it in, because like we like to package sex in such a way that suggests that it's this one thing that we do, in the same way that like we like to compartmentalize like the various areas of our lives, right? But like in actuality, sex is merely a one part of the whole gestalt. I don't know if that's the right application of that word, but like it is one component of the courtship, you could say, the kind of entire integrated process of courtship that is shared between a man and a woman, right? If you really think about it, like sex is merely the climax of a dance that happens between a man and a woman. That starts from when he meets her, all the way to the part where the man has sex with the woman, right? And so like there is a component to sex that like is kind of not. Sex is put on this pedestal, like, oh my God, it's sex. It's like it's the one thing that like that kind of it's the one magical thing that happens, that is the highlight of everything, really. The highlights of a man and woman's like encounter, right? But like, what is sex? Have you ever had sex or like masturbated and it didn't really feel that good? You orgasmed, right? But it wasn't exactly like making you see like an alternate reality. It wasn't exactly earth shattering, right? Really all that sex is a release, right? It is a release of one's energy that has been built up, right? And the release of like one's semen if you're a man. But then the thing that people miss is like, where does that energy come from? Where is that energy built up, right? The energy is built up throughout the entire courtship process or the seduction process that happens between a man and a woman, right? You could call this foreplay. And foreplay is equally important, if not more important, in the woman's case than the actual act of sex is, right? And this is the single most biggest misconception of sexuality in society, right? And this is something that I guess this plays into why women are so confused about their sexuality, right? It is that sex. You could argue that sex, we like to give it this label of sex, but sex is really, like I say, there's one part, the climax. It is the climax, so it stands out the most, but it is merely one part of this entire journey that is the kind of the dance between man and woman, right? And men are obviously focused towards the endpoints of this courtship, right? Men are always chasing for the endpoints of sex, right? He's looking to bust a nut in her, right? That's just how he works, right? As a man, I can vouch for that because I am a man, right? But for a woman, right? The part of the sexual journey, you could say, the seduction journey that she is tends to be more focused on is actually the foreplay part, right? Now, does that sound all that alien to you? Like, have you never heard that women enjoy foreplay more than sex? Well, that's how it is, right? Actually, because the thing is, right, this is something I learned from Real Social Dynamics, which is, again, like a cool like dating coaching kind of organization that I follow. Tyler or Owen, the kind of kingpin, let's just say, of RSD, he what he usually says is that if you view sex, if you view like seduction as a movie, right? And women have the capacity or the ability to watch the end of the movie whenever they want. Right, women can see the end of the movie whenever they want, which translates to women can have sex whenever they want. It's not something that people talk about openly, but it's true, right? If you're a woman, dick is abundant. Dick is abundant. There's no shortage of dick, right? If you're a woman, you're not going to be saying oh shit, there's as you're a woman, you're not going to be thinking, oh man, where am I going to find some dick, right? No, you find dick anywhere. You could walk a couple blocks and there's someone who would be willing to put it in you, as you say, if you want to put it crudely like that. But it's true, right? Women can see the end of the movie whenever they want, right? Whereas men are desperate for the end of the movie, right? But rather what the woman wants is she wants the build up to the end of the movie, right? She wants the kind of emotional roller coaster, you could say, that precedes, the almighty the climax of the film, right? She wants a man to come up to her, to challenge her, to make her feel to make her feel amazing, to make her laugh, to show her some amazing thing that she's never seen before, to defy all her expectations of how she thinks men are, how she thinks he is, and she wants this amazing journey where this man is bringing her everywhere and showing all these amazing things and creating drama between them and turning her on, but then pulling back and making her want it. She wants that shit. That's what she lives for as a woman, right? She could have sex whenever she wants. Whenever she wants, even if she's not gonna, even if she doesn't know it or that she doesn't want to admit it, she can get sex whenever she wants. It's her birthright as a woman, essentially. It's just how it works, right? In society or in life, if you're a woman, you can get sex whenever you want. You can get someone to have sex with you if you want. What she's looking for is amazing foreplay. That is the best part of sex for her. It is all of the stuff that leads up to sex, right? And yeah, I've basically just articulated, the main kind of again, another part of the attraction profile of women, right? The attraction profile of the attraction profile of a man is he's looking to hit that climax at the end of it, right? Or rather, the part that he's most focused on is the end part, the climax, right? When they have sex, right? Sexual intercourse. But the part of the attraction profile of the woman, or the seduction profile, I should say, the kind of timeline that kind of profiles, the whole seduction. The men are focused on the end, but the women are more focused in the beginning and the middle. Or you could say the middle, right? The middle part, the foreplay, the things that are leading up to sex, right? Sex is the icing on the cake for women. It's not like men. For men, sex is the motive. Sex is the prize, right? But for women, it's not like that, right? For women, sex is the icing on the cake, and the cake has to be delicious. And the cake is the foreplay. The cake is the kind of emotional journey. The journey that she and the man goes through before they have sex, right? That's why women typically take longer to get aroused. They typically take longer to get interested in sex, because they're not sex is not the prize for them, right? The prize for them is a man who shows them a good time, who creates all this amazing drama in her life, right? Right. But having said this, this is another thing with sexuality and gender in general, which is that although we may be like different genders, at least if you look at us physically, right? There is still a grey line between the sexes, right? So I've made this very clear distinction between the sexes, but there is still a grey line nevertheless, right? So if you're a man, right, who is typically viewed by people as being like a sex fiend, who's always just looking for sex, who just wants to have sex, right? That's not to say that the man does not enjoy foreplay. If you ask a man and he's honest and he's like aware, he will tell you that yes, he tends to focus more on sex. That's just the way he's built biologically, right? Sex is his prize, but like that doesn't mean that like good foreplay is a miss, right? It does not mean that like good foreplay leads to better sex. It's part of that. It's part of the same thing. Like you build up the energy so that when you have sex, it's amazing, right? Any man who's aware enough will tell you that, right? So a man is not just focused on sex. Like he also wants to have a good time with the woman, to laugh, to like have a bit of banter with her, to like have a bit of drama with her, to do some crazy things with her before sex. A man can be a romantic. Not all men are really, are sex fiends. Like some men are quite romantic. Like they like going on dates and like having all of these experiences with a girl. And this is the interesting thing, especially for men, right? Women, even though they're focused more on like the kind of build up, aren't necessarily like indifferent about sex, right? Doesn't mean that women don't enjoy sex. They just want the build up, but then after that, yeah, sure, they'll have sex. They're glad to have sex. They like sex, right? They like sex, right? And you'll find some girls who like sex more than others, right? There's a grey line. You find some men who are more romantic and less sexual. You'll find some women who are more sexual and less romantic, right? That is the beauty of the sexual nuance. The sexual grey area that we find ourselves in. I haven't even gone into like more kind of like taboo aspects of sexuality when we start to go into like areas where the genders are like more blurred, right? Sex changes and things like that. No, well, I'm not really going to go into that in this entry, but like yeah, so like I've given you basically like an idea, like and really like for me it just gave me a bit more oversight as to like what it's like, particularly like from the opposite sex's perspective, right? It's interesting, right? It's very interesting to me. There is one more thing that I will mention also that like is part of this, which is that why is it that women are more comfortable to be with a man than a man is with a woman without having sex, right? And what I just explained basically, what I just described basically explains this, right? For women, sex is not the prize, right? As much as it is for men, right? For men, sex is the prize. Like that's the whole reason they're in a relationship with a girl, right? Like he like that is what he is drawn towards, right? Right. And if you're a woman, and this offends you, like, you can then ask yourself, why is it that you're offended, right? It's like, imagine if you were a man and like you have this kind of hunger for sex, right? And if it's not satiated, you feel like shit, right? Like it hurts you, like a lot of men, like, because of feminism, I guess, like, they're afraid to express this, It's funny because like, like everyone knows that men are perverts, right? But there are lots of like good-hearted men out there who like don't want to admit this because of the feminist narrative, right? And of course when I say feminist narrative, I'm not slating women, I'm slating the narrative, right? Of feminism. And so yeah, that's the reason why women make friends with men more easily. It's because like they're not necessarily so focused or so hungry for sex that men are, right? You know, if anything, like they like just interacting with a man, you know. And if it doesn't have to lead to sex, it doesn't have to lead to sex, right? You know, you can make the argument that, like, you know, she can have sex, she can fuck anyone that she wants. So like like she's not like dying to fuck someone, right? And if you're nice enough, like she's not doing, and like I guess this is an easy trap for guys to fall into. Like, she's not like doing it because she's a bitch. You know, it's tempting to think that way. Like, why is she choosing this guy over me to have sex with? You know, like this fucking bitch. No, like, there's no malice behind it. It's just like, well, he's nice, you know, like, and he like, I don't want to think of him in that way, you know, like, you know, I think it's nice that we have a friendship, like, that doesn't have to go to sex. It's fine, you know, in the woman's perspective, it's okay, right? You know, like, I like having a male friend here, you know, who can take care of me a bit, you know. It's like maybe she might be expecting it, you know, but she might not be, you know. Like, it's like, you know, he just happens to take care of me, right? In the back of her mind, if she's aware, she probably knows, like, that like, part of the reason why he's being so nice to her is because he wants to fuck her, right? And like, you know, it'd be silly to deny that, you know. It's just like, it's always going to be something that, you know, that men do because, hey, like, we kind of want sex, you know. We want sex a lot more than women, right? Sex is the thing for us, right? If we don't have sex, it's like, it's crazy, right? It's just like, okay, it's just like, if you're a woman and you're trying to imagine what it's like to be a man, it's like, imagine if like you had no, you couldn't, like, if you had no intimacy from men. Not sexual intimacy, but like intimacy where like he looks out for you, you know, he's there to listen to you and to like accept you, you know, to like talk emotionally with you, you know. If he wasn't there, how would you feel? If you didn't have a man to protect you, how would you feel, right? That same feeling is the same as what it feels like to be a man who is denied of sex, of sexual intimacy, right? A woman without emotional intimacy, you could say, or yeah, emotional intimacy, physical protection, it's like a man without sexual intimacy, right? And vice versa, right? So like, you know, like, this is why I find it funny when people give these one-sided things. You know, it's like these one-sided, like, you know, diatribes about the other sex, you know, the opposite sex. But like, I can kind of see where they're coming from. You know, like, from an individual perspective, I'm like, yeah, you know, okay, fair enough. You know, we all have our own pain, you know, that we need to talk about. But at the same time, if you were to just understand it from the opposite sex's perspective, like, you'd be a lot less like butthurt about it, right? There was one more thing I was going to say. Oh yeah, there's one more thing I was saying, and if I remember any more, I'm going to talk about them, because like, I think about this kind of thing so much, right? Which is interesting because I don't already have that much experience, but like, it's just something that like I'm really interested in. The one other thing I want to talk about is there are certain things that are not expected of you by the opposite sex, right? So the first example is that men are not expected to be nurturing, right? This is funny because like, I just did an entry called like, I'm a healer, you know, talking about like the healer type, right? But like, it's fine, you know, because, you know, when you get into the energy of abundance, you know, this is like an unrelated point, but like, it doesn't matter so much anymore, right? It's not a big deal, but like, you know, it just means don't do it, you know, like, do it somewhere else, right? You know, find some other vehicle to do it in, right? But like, yeah, but like, you know, so an example of this is like, you know, when you cuddle, like when you have sex, right? When you've had sex and you cuddle, right? Like, a woman is not expecting you as a man to kind of like to kind of like nurture her, like to be like, oh, you know, like, and like give her like a little like to give her reassurance and things like that, right? Like, that's not really expected from a man, right? A man doesn't nurture. Like, a man protects, a man encourages, a man does heal, but like, he heals in a proactive way, right? He's not there and he's like kind of like
catering for her needs and looking after her like a mother kind of a thing, right? A woman does not expect that from a man, right? And conversely, like a man does not expect a woman to have to lead, right? That's not to say that if if you're a man, doesn't mean like you should never be nurturing. You should never be kind of maternal in that way. Yeah, like that's probably the best way of explaining it. Like, a woman doesn't necessarily expect a man to be maternal, right? Because a man, that's not kind of really the man's role in the relationship, right? And similarly, like a man does not expect the woman to be paternal, right? Like she can lead, she can have her own opinions, she can be a bit aggressive from time to time, like, and express her opinions, but like he's not expecting her to like step up and be like, okay, fine, I'll take care of you. Yeah, I'll take care of the situation. Like when she doesn't need to, because like that's, as a woman, that's not what you're supposed to. That's not really your role, right? Like, and like if you really think about it, like it kind of feels better if you just let the kind of natural gender roles unravel themselves anyway. That's not to say like you should never go against them, but like as a man, even if you're quite a feminine man, like myself, right? Like I don't want to say feminine, but like a softer male, more sensitive male. It feels better when you let her do the healing, and when you do like the kind of like the leading generally, right? When you do like you take care of things generally. And as a woman, like even if you're like, you identify as more masculine, like more take charge, more alpha, more dominant, right? More like kind of like independent, more like kind of happy to express her own opinion, stuff like that. Take care of herself. You generally feel better when you let the man lead when he can, and when you take a back seat and support him, right? The big problem, like I don't actually know if this is the case, right? So it'd be interesting if like anyone to comment on this and to like let me know. But like if women kind of like feel inferior and like therefore like they feel bad whenever like they let a man kind of take control like that. Like that's really weird to me. Like I don't know if that's a natural thing, but like it could be that some women think like that because of the feminist narrative, right? I don't know. I have no idea really, but like that's very curious because like I guess as a man, like there's probably a case that mirrors that. Not that I can really, yeah. I don't know. Like, I think ordinarily, like, it wouldn't be such a big deal. It's only if, like, kind of like name calling was involved. Like judgment. Like you're bad because of this. I think it's only then when like egos are hurt. But like, I don't think necessarily that like women mind if men take the lead. Like I think all like this is the thing, right? I believe that all women secretly want their men to be leaders, right? Like there's nothing egoic about it. It's like, and all men secretly want their women to be kind of like to kind of sit back and support them and do what women do best, which is to nurture and heal, right? Again, that's not to say that like you have to be like, you have to like stringently like like adhere to like gender roles. No, I'm not saying that at all. Like I as a man, for example, like I'm a healer. Like I don't give a fuck. Like if I have to sit here and cry just to like release my own emotion and like to heal myself in that way, I'll do it. In the same way that a woman should just go about and do whatever it is that she needs to do, right? But I think when you're in that relationship dynamic, you have to be mindful of like what will feel the best. Yes, as a woman in a relationship, like if you had to step up, you could step up, right? But is that necessarily going to make you feel better versus like if you just let your man handle it and you have more faith in him as a man? Or like if you're a man, like you have to be the understanding one where like, or no, well, you have to kind of like do like the kind of like the healing, you know, like the kind of like support role, you know, where like is that like when you look at your woman and you see her struggling, you're like, I feel like I should probably be doing this, you know, and give your woman like her role so that she can then support you. You know, it's like there's a lot of grey lines, you know, in sexuality. You know, this obviously this entry is not a be all and end all of sexuality. It's just like my kind of recent realizations and perceptions surrounding it. But you know, obviously there are loads of grey areas. You know, there's a lot of kind of uncharted territory that I haven't, you know, explored. Obviously myself, that I don't even know if I'll ever get around to exploring. But like, this is just my understanding of how the energies work, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, there are differences between us, like, you know, even physiologically or like in terms of our expectations in society. But like also, you got to understand that you know, well, this issue is multidimensional in the same way that anything in life is multidimensional. Really, you know, there's always a practical or like observable or like obvious level to things, where it's like you can see it, you can smell it, you can think about it, you can conceptualize of it. But there's also like a spiritual like component, right? To things, right? You know, and this is why women like typically are more confused, you know, about this the sexuality in society, because like what they kind of find attractive is a lot more difficult to communicate. It's not as simple as like, oh, she's got a nice ass or she's got a nice rack, right? It's like how that man carries himself, you know, like the confidence that he has, right? You know, the ability, like again, you know, the axis of perception, right, is a concept I coined, right? You know, the man's attraction is vertical, is symbolic, is to do with physicality. A woman's attraction is energetic, it's to do with context, it's to do with identity, it's to do with meaning, right? And so any man, you know, as a woman, it's obvious what you need to do to attract a man. Like, you have to, like, it's obvious, you know. You can complain that, like, yeah, it's hard to, like, you know, it's hard to be pretty all the time, it's hard to, like, with all this makeup and shit. Well, you have it easy in a way, you know, because, like, all you have to do is make yourself look good, you know, it's obvious, right? But as a man, like, you know, and this is something that RSD teaches, right? You know, it's not what, essentially what they say is, like, it's not what you say, it's how, it's where you're saying it from, right? It is your energy. So like you can be anyone, right? Or you can like represent anything, as long as you have confidence in it, as long as your identity is secure, right? You know, you could be a nerd and walk up to a girl, and as long as you own the fact that you're a fucking nerd, like, she will feel attraction towards you. She might not like, or she will see you as a man, basically. Like, you know, she might not necessarily be so attracted to you that she's going to sleep with you or something like that, or become your girlfriend, but she will at least recognize that, okay, this man gets it. She may not be able to articulate it, you know, herself, but like she will be able to say, okay, yeah, you know, this is a man, you know, at least he's comfortable with himself, you know, I can trust this man, right? I might not be so attracted to him that I'm going to sleep with him right now, but like, you know, I respect him as a man, you know, because he knows what he wants, right? So anyway, this is a really long entry. Like, this is an interesting thing that, like, I might link this entry or this video, but like, it's a Teal Swan video where she talks about sexuality, but like she talks about how this looks like in terms of energy, right? Or in terms of like, if you add the energetic components, I think, to it, to the bigger picture, right? So like when sex occurs, right, it's very obvious that the man penetrates the woman physically, right, with his penis, like, into her vagina. But then what also happens energetically is that the woman penetrates the man energetically, right? And so as the man penetrates the woman physically, the woman penetrates the man energetically, right? So what this looks like is that the man impregnates the woman, and the woman becomes the man's one of the man's primary focuses in life, right? So, you know, like, I guess this means that, like, for a man, like, I don't know about this actually, because like I don't have so much experience, but like, yeah, it's another kind of interesting perspective surrounding, you know, like the kind of dynamics of sexuality, adding in like the component that isn't necessarily so easily perceived, right? So cool. Anyway, like really, this entry was just like me just gushing about like what I know or what I intuitively have come to understanding of in terms of sexuality. It may or may not be applicable. You may write me off as someone who's just like kind of like rambling about shit he doesn't really know about. But like, hey, you know, like I just thought that I'd give my perspective and like hopefully it gives some overarching kind of visibility over like how can we understand, at least on a conceptual level, you know, how sexuality works between the sexes, and how can we even use that knowledge to make sex and relationships a more kind of smooth operation, right? So cool. Anyway, I hope that was enjoyable and entertaining and insightful, and I will catch you guys in the next entry. Peace out.